There's just something about cornfields, isn't there? The way the stalks grow high, blocking out anything beyond a few steps ahead. The strange rustling sounds that make it seem like you're not alone. So many horror stories start there for a reason. There's just no telling what might be hiding within. Tonight, we're going to look at 3 terrifying true stories of people who had creepy encounters in cornfields. Let's dive in, if you dare. Story 1. The Vanishing Girl. Our first story happened to a young couple, Mike and Sarah. They were out for a late-night drive through the countryside. And for a little adventure, they decided to stop by an old cornfield that was rumored to be haunted. It seemed innocent enough. The moon was out and everything was still. They ventured in, laughing and daring each other to go further. But then they heard it, soft crying somewhere within the corn. It sounded like a young girl. Thinking it was just the wind, Mike shrugged it off, but Sarah felt uneasy. She shined her flashlight into the rows, and that's when they saw her. A young girl standing there, facing away from them. They called out, asking if she was okay, but the girl didn't respond. Instead, she turned and began walking deeper into the cornfield, disappearing into the darkness. Mike and Sarah decided to follow, worried that she might be lost or hurt. But the deeper they went, the foggier everything became. They could barely make out the girl in the distance, her pale figure flickering in and out of view, almost as if she was floating rather than walking. And then, in a flash, she was gone. Realizing how far they'd wandered, they turned back, but they couldn't find their way out. After what felt like hours, they finally stumbled back to their car, only to look back and see the same young girl standing at the edge of the field, watching them. When they later told the story to locals, they found out that others had seen her too. A girl who had supposedly gone missing decades ago in the very same field, never to be found. Since that night, they haven't dared to go near a cornfield again. Story 2. The Haunted Corn Maze. Our next story takes us to Illinois, at a Halloween corn maze attraction. It was Halloween night, and people were out in droves, hoping to get a good scare. A group of friends was going through the maze, laughing and enjoying themselves. But as they went deeper, they noticed something strange. A figure that didn't seem to be part of the attraction. At first, they saw it just standing there, dressed in tattered clothes and what looked like an old handmade scarecrow mask. They thought it was just a worker trying to scare people. But then, as they moved forward, they realized this scarecrow figure was following them. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to unsettle them. They quickened their pace, but every time they thought they'd lost him, he'd reappear, just close enough to be unnerving. When they finally reached the maze's exit, they turned around, relieved to leave it all behind. But there he was again, just standing at the entrance, watching them. The next day, they told the story to the maze organizers. But here's the creepy part. There were no actors wearing scarecrow costumes that night. To this day, some people who visit that corn maze still report seeing a strange scarecrow figure. Some say he's just there to add to the scare factor. Others swear he's something else altogether. Whatever he is, he's still showing up every Halloween. Story 3. The Cornfield Voices. Our last story is about a farmer named Henry, who had spent his life working in his family's cornfield. One night, while he was out closing up for the day, he started hearing whispers. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but the sounds were too clear, almost like a chant, and he was sure he heard his name being called. So, flashlight in hand, he decided to walk into the field and see what was going on. As he walked deeper into the corn, the voices grew louder, more frantic. He kept calling out, thinking maybe someone was lost, but no one answered. The only thing he could hear was his name, repeated in a low, eerie whisper. Every time he tried to turn back, he'd lose his sense of direction, like something was keeping him in place. The air around him grew colder and the voices louder until he was completely disoriented, as though the field itself was closing in. Finally, he managed to stumble back to his house, his face pale and his hands shaking. When he told his wife what had happened, she didn't believe him, until a few days later, when she heard the voices too. For years, they continued to hear strange whispers near the field every evening, always around dusk, until eventually they sold the farm and moved away. The new owners claimed they never heard anything, but their dog would always avoid the edge of the field, growling at the darkness. Maybe it's the isolation, or maybe it's the way cornfields seem to go on forever, but there's something about them that just invites the supernatural. Mike and Sarah, the group in the haunted maze, and even Farmer Henry, they all learned that some things in cornfields just aren't meant to be understood. So the next time you're near one, especially at night, remember, not everything inside those rows wants to be found, and some things might be watching you. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales. Stay safe out there, and maybe steer clear of cornfields.